Alright, it's Greg here from Project Unbroken. So today I'm going to be talking about what sobriety is like after drug and alcohol addiction. Now, I love this topic. And I love this topic because there was a time when I did not like sobriety at all. And I kept going back to using. Fast forward till today, I love being sober. I can't imagine not being sober. The reason I like this topic so much is because of that. And because I'm going to be able to share why sobriety sucked for me and now why sobriety is awesome. And through that, I expect to help people and help them approach sobriety with confidence and help them be happy in sobriety. So stay tuned. Alright, so a quick introduction just on my past use. I started using drugs and alcohol around 12 or 13. I believe I first drank when I was like 12. And then, a little bit of drinking and smoking weed throughout high school. When I got out of high school, I got really heavy into smoking weed. I would smoke weed every day, pretty much. Drink on weekends, occasionally still. Eventually, that led me into other drugs. I did cocaine, ecstasy, pretty much everything, just about. I never did crystal methamphetamine, never smoked crack. Those are about the two I never did. The weed and the alcohol and other recreational drugs eventually led me to pill use. And I started with mainly Oxycontin and Roxy-Sets, a little bit of Percocet, Vicodin here and there. But my drug of choice was really Oxycontin. That was my favorite. Fast forward, a couple years of doing that, a couple times, once a week, twice a week, I ended up getting on heroin. I was a heroin addict for a few years. To get off the heroin, I got on methadone, and then eventually I got off the methadone where I'm now clean today. So I have a lot of experience with drug use, and my main drugs of choice were opiates. But this really applies. This sobriety video and how to what sobriety is like and how to make sobriety good is really for everything. My wife is an alcoholic. She went to rehab a year and a half ago. She's been clean for a year and a half, and it applies to her too. The same things. I can tell you a little story about that at the end of the video. So this really applies to all addictions, drug addiction, alcohol addiction, all of it. It applies to everything. So what I want to go through is the different stages of my recovery. Because really for me, sobriety was very different at different times with different drugs. And it's important to understand all this, and it will all come together by the end of this video, okay? Again, the whole goal is to help people approach sobriety with confidence, and you need to know that you can be happy in sobriety. Like literally, if I am not sober, right, like if for example, if I even take like NyQuil, I took NyQuil a few months ago, I freaked out. Why? Because it started making me feel weird. Like, I'm so comfortable in sobriety that when I don't feel like myself, I start getting very uncomfortable. And that's how I know that I am, I am very, very happy in recovery is I do not like not feeling like myself. Like, I'm very happy in my own skin. Okay, so it's very possible to go from a severe drug addiction to being very comfortable in sobriety and very happy with your life, all right? So let's start with my first addiction. My first addiction was to marijuana, I would say. And that's a little weird because I didn't even like smoking weed that much. I would pretty much smoke every day and wonder why I was doing it. But I still couldn't get away from it. I was still addicted to it. Maybe more of a habit than an addiction, but kind of the same thing, I guess. Now, when I stopped smoking weed, it wasn't that hard. Really, all I had to do was break away from the group of friends that was using. So, I had a group of friends and we would roll up weed in a blunt, smoke it, drive around, roll up another one, smoke it, drive, like literally just smoking weed all day, driving around, smoking blunts. That was my life for probably a year or two. And as much as I didn't like it, I'd be in the back of the car kind of bugging out a little bit because I have a little bit of I'm an introvert. I have a little bit of anxiety here and there. Not as much anymore, but definitely back then, especially when I was smoking. I would kind of just get anxiety the whole day because I'd be so high, smoke ridiculous amounts of weed. But again, it wasn't that hard to quit because all I had to do was break away. The sobriety from my marijuana addiction was definitely short term. And there's a reason for this. And this is kind of one of the big things for sobriety and the importance of, being happy in sobriety. And I'll cover in this in just a little bit. So when I got off weed, it was really a short period of being sober because I really went back to the pills, pretty quickly, probably within a couple weeks. I might have a couple weeks of sobriety. So my next short-term kind of sobriety was stints from heroin, because the pills, led me to heroin. I used heroin every single day, and then a couple years into it, maybe 2-3 years in, I started trying to quit. And I would fail, and I would quit, and I would fail, and I'd quit, and I'd fail. The usual heroin addict stuff where many heroin addicts try to quit and fail many times. This was much different, okay? This was much different than the marijuana, and there's a couple reasons. Number one is it had a physical hold on me, okay? So when I quit smoking weed, there was no physical symptoms for me. Some people do experience withdrawal symptoms when they quit weed. For me, there was none. I don't know if that had to do with me not liking it that much or what the case is. Just different people react differently to different things, but it just wasn't hard. There was no physical reaction. There was no mental reaction. I was actually somewhat relieved. And I want to compare this to help people understand, maybe if you've never done heroin, you don't understand opiates, or you don't understand drug or alcohol addiction. I want to compare it to relationships, because love is much like a drug. It has very much to do with it. There is something called love addiction. Okay, it hits the same part of the brain. I don't know the science behind it. I don't know if it's the same exact part, but it hits a very similar part of the brain. So when I stopped smoking marijuana, it was kind of like I broke up with someone that I didn't really like. Okay, breakups are never easy, right? So it's not easy to get away from that person. But when you break up with someone you don't like, it's pretty easy once you get away from them. The hardest part is just getting away from them, right? It was the same thing with weed. It was hard for me to get away from the weed, but once I was away, it was like a relief. Same thing with a relationship. If you're in a relationship with someone you really don't want to be with anymore, and you get away from them, it's kind of like a relief. You get to kind of live life on your own terms again. With heroin, it wasn't like that, because I loved heroin. It was like breaking up with someone I loved. I would break up with them, and I would get back together with them. I'd break up with them, get back together. Break up, get back together. It was a repeating cycle. Love is strong, right? And I'm sure many people have had relationships like that, where it's not working out, but you still love the person, so you keep trying it, and you're trying it, and you keep trying it. Eventually, I saw that this relationship wasn't working. It was very hard to get away from it, but I did. Now, the next part of my sobriety was more long-term. And again, this wasn't necessarily, sobriety. Some people I know the comment Nazis be like, you weren't really sober, you were on methadone. But I'm saying being away from heroin. I was used to doing heroin. My next sobriety, so to speak, was when I jumped on methadone. Okay, so I got off the heroin, got on methadone. It wasn't really easy at first. It was somewhat easy, but it wasn't. And at first, I kept going back to my first love. I kept going back to the heroin here and there, but then I would see, it's not working, it's not working. And eventually I stayed on the methadone, right? I just stayed on methadone, didn't use heroin. But even when I went to the methadone, it was like I went back to the heroin still here and there. And as I did that, I guess, as I got further into it, it wasn't super hard, but I think it wasn't super hard just because methadone was a replacement. It was almost like, comparing it back to a relationship, it was like I met someone else, right? I met someone else that really was still toxic. My first love was toxic. This person's still toxic, maybe not as toxic, but they're still the same type of person, still not the right person for me. So I just kind of have a replacement there, but just a little less toxic. And again, I wasn't happy during that. It was just, my life was just blah, at that point, because although the person wasn't as toxic, I didn't love that person. They didn't really do anything for me. They were boring. They did nothing for me. They had no excitement in my life. You gotta stimulate your brain. There was no brain stimulation. Okay? So my last part of sobriety, or my last kind of stage, was my complete sobriety. And that's when I got off methadone. Now, what's crazy is this was the easiest one. And this was the best one. And this is supposed to be the hardest one. But for me, it was the easiest and it was the best one. There was hard parts of it, But in the end, it was the easiest stage because it led me to truly being happy. Now, when I got off the methadone, I did things very, very different than what I did with the marijuana, the heroin, and the methadone, which were really my 3 addictions before that. What I did different is number one, I did a positive replacement. Okay? So in my first 2 or 3 or whatever it is, what marijuana, heroin, in marijuana and heroin, I had no positive replacement. Okay, so for marijuana, really my replacement was like pills. For the pills, my replacement was really heroin. And then for heroin, really my replacement was methadone. So I had replacements, but they weren't positive. When I got off methadone, I had a positive replacement. And for me, that was exercise. For you, it may not be exercise. I don't want to push exercise on people. It's great for you. It can get the endorphins flowing in your brain. It can get you thinking right. It can get it can get your confidence back and can do a lot of things for you. So I do recommend it. I think you should try it, but you don't have to. Just find some type of positive replacement. This can be knitting. This can be going to church. This can be going to meetings. This can be anything that's positive. Just get a positive replacement, okay? When I came off marijuana, one of my big mistakes was I was bored. I didn't fill my time with anything, and definitely not anything positive, okay? When I got off the methadone, I filled my time with plenty of positive things. Exercise was number 1. Number 2 is building my business. And what these 2 things did was they built my confidence and they gave me goals, okay? Goals are number 2, and that's where business comes in, and really health too. Because for me, I started doing CrossFit, I started feeling better, started changing my brain chemistry, started building my confidence, and I started setting goals. Okay, I want to be able to do a muscle up. Okay, I want to be able to squat 300 pounds. I want to be able to deadlift 400. I was able to set lifting goals for myself, and that enabled me to work for things and kind of look forward to things. Same thing with business. I'd spend my spare time working on my business, building up my career, building up what I want to work towards. I always envisioned me working for myself, which I do today. I work for myself. I work when I want, where I want. I'm an internet marketer, so I can work on anywhere I can bring a computer, I can work. And the whole time I envisioned that, okay? And it was part of the goal process. I had a goal to work for myself and live life on my terms. And that's what excited me about working, was I knew I was working towards that. I was working towards where I want to be, okay? The next thing I did is I had positive people around me. So again, when I quit smoking weed, when I quit doing pills, when I quit doing heroin, none of those, after those 3, I had positive people around me. And I also didn't have goals. I don't know if I said that already. But I didn't have any of these 3 things. I didn't have any positive replacement. I didn't have any goals. I didn't have any positive people around me. When I quit the methadone, I had all 3 of those in place, okay? The positive people came from the CrossFit gym. People cheering you on, and people who don't live in the drug life, and people who live positive lives, have families, and just positive people, okay? Now, the whole point of this is when you go into sobriety, you need to make changes, all right? And my recommendation for changes are get a positive replacement, some type of positive replacement. I highly recommend exercise or maybe some yoga or something along those lines, but it doesn't have to be. It can be a church group or, again, knitting or just some type of positive activity. You need to fill your time with something positive. Because if you quit a drug or alcohol and you're sitting around with nothing to do, it's going to make sobriety suck. Because all you're going to do is think about that drug or think about your alcohol, and eventually you're going to give in. Okay, and I've done it over and over and over again. And that's one of the biggest reasons that people fall back into their addiction, is they don't fill their time with anything positive, and they sit around twiddling their thumbs thinking about how bad they missed their drug. All right, so very, very important. Also, setting goals. This will give you things to fill your time with, whether it's building a business or building back up your health or building up relationships or, volunteer work or anything, just, helping people. Set some type of goal so you can fill up your time. You can't sit around in sobriety twiddling your thumbs. It is a disaster, all right? The last thing is that I learned from my mistakes. I really looked back on my whole addiction. Like, I looked at all the things I did, like, and really, I guess I can think of a few of my main mistakes. One of the main mistakes I made was falling victim to instant gratification. You know, I constantly went for the easy choice. You know, I constantly made the easy decision. I want to feel good right now. Sniff some heroin, right? Pop a pill. That's not how it works. If you want to feel good, you got to work for it. So the big lesson I learned is that I had to work for my happiness. And at first it can be tough. It can be a transition. But as you do it, you kind of start to enjoy it. You know, I now enjoy working to feel good. I enjoy the work because I know what it's doing for me. And for those of you who are struggling with alcohol, let me tell you a little story about my wife. So she drank since she was like 13, and you know, I think she got married at like 23, drank pretty much every day of her marriage, and eventually we met after she got divorced. She drank pretty much every day with me, so she pretty much drank every day for close to 20 years. Now we got to a stage in our relationship where I had enough of it. Different story for a different day, but she went to rehab, okay? When she got out of rehab, I'll never forget this. It was like her first day or two out of rehab, and we're driving, and I said, big mistake by me. I said, how does it feel to know that you're never going to drink again? And she didn't say anything. I kind of looked over at her. I said, you're right? And she was like freaking out. She was like having an anxiety attack. And I'm like, what's wrong? She's like, just the thought of never drinking again is totally freaking me out. I can't think about this right now. And I realized I asked her a horrible question. And what I told her was, you have to realize that how you feel now is not how you're going to feel throughout the rest of your life. And I think that's a big mistake a lot of people make. You know, they're in the depths of withdrawal, or they're, you know, newly out of their addiction, and they don't feel good about themselves. And they think to themselves, I can't live this way. But what they don't realize is that's temporary. They're not going to feel like that forever. Okay, and that's something I realized that really helped me get through my kind of recovery and progress forward, was that the way I feel right now, you know, like when I first came off the methadone, which wasn't great, like I wasn't sleeping, I had some anxiety, restless legs, I didn't have my confidence back yet, didn't really know who I was, like I kind of lost myself, so I wasn't feeling good about myself. But I came to the realization that how I feel right now is not how I'm going to feel 3 months from now. And that's not how I'm going to feel 6 months from now. And that's not how I'm going to feel a year from now. Like, it's going to get better and better. So people get this feeling and it comes over them just like my wife did when we were in the car that day. And they say, I can't live like this. And they go back to using. Extremely important you understand that feeling goes away. How you feel right now, or when you're new in sobriety, is not how you continue to feel, as long as you work towards it, as long as you keep progressing, as long as you keep these steps that I laid out for you, all right? And now my wife's in a place, well, I guess we can go like 3 months forward, where she didn't really miss drinking as much, but when people drank in front of her, it would throw her off a little bit. Like, she'd be like, I really wish I could drink. Now, a year and a half later, she's at the point where she's like, I can't imagine drinking. I can't believe I used to do that. So again, it just shows the progression, okay? The way you feel at the beginning is not how you feel long term. And that's what people get tricked into thinking. They get tricked into thinking that how they feel right now is going to last forever. And they're like, oh, I can't live like this. I'm just might as well go back to using. You have to stick it out, because it will not last. All right, so I hope you enjoyed this video on what sobriety is like after addiction. Sobriety can be completely horrible. It can completely suck, as it did for me many times, or it can be awesome. I mean, no joke, I can't imagine not being sober. I love being sober. I take pride in being sober. I really do. You know, when I go out and everyone else is drinking, I kind of like it that I don't have to, you know, everyone else is drinking or doing whatever. I don't have to do anything to feel good. I just need to be myself. That's it. You know, I can go out and talk to people and hang out without doing anything. Totally being myself. And it's a very, very good feeling. But it took work to get here. Okay? And I had to push myself. So what is sobriety like after addiction? It's however you want it to be. It's however you frame it. And the more positive things you put into place, the more of these steps you put into place, the better it's going to be for you. If you have any questions, as always, make sure you reach out. Greg, Project Unbroken. Catch y'all soon.